Alrighty, it is Tuesday, December 23rd. I'm here with my friend Chase, as always. A lot happened this past weekend. For starters, actually, I don't even know where to start. We could talk about the Turning Point USA or the Epstein
Mhm.
Files. I will let you choose where we go first.
I guess we could start with Epstein.
Okay, Epstein Files were released. I
Um,
mean, what
were
would
they?
you?
Were they really?
Yeah. Apparently only 1% of the Epstein files have been released. And that 1%, about 90% of it has been redacted. Black lines through everything.
Yeah.
Actually released a video or a photo of Trump and then took it off the website.
hmm
And then now they just added it back again, like yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so initial thoughts, are we thinking that this implicates Trump even more, making him look even more guilty?
I mean, there's clearly somebody is trying to be protected. I mean, that's the only argument that can be made, I think, at this point. And um, the more and more evidence that comes out about certain things, it does make things, very questionable, and especially like regarding Trump. And just like he pops up a lot. And a lot in the files. So it's like, I don't know. Um, I would be a little nervous if I was him, if I came up that much. And not even just in terms of, saying he did something or not, but just being associated, I think, as president with that type of behavior and those type of people. Um, it really kind of undercuts your arguments about like the evil elite. And it's like you were hanging out with the evil elite. Like that's your crowd.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it does to me begin to start to indicate more that there's clearly somebody in some way is being protected. It is interesting to, I was even reading like, Fox had even said that like politicians and exposed political figures were like given the same like procedures, I guess, and concern as victims. Was the Fox report originally, which the White House came out and was like, no, that's not the case. Um, but I mean, it does seem that like certain people aren't covered, but like Bill Clinton's everywhere, which seems to be a little convenient for me. And I found it funny that Bill Clinton was like, "Go ahead, everything that I'm in, show it,
Yeah,
just do
release the
it." And
files.
it's like, okay, like either one, he's just like somebody was saying a kamikaze pedophile, but either that's what's happening, or you know maybe he's innocent. You never really know. Like I think that's the thing, and most assumptions are that like if you had anything to do with it, Epstein, that like there was something there. But like I don't know. I don't think Michael Jackson and Diana Ross were like doing anything at that moment.
Exactly.
So, I think people need to understand that like there's going to be so many different people connected to him. And do think like, he was borderline celebrity, which is crazy. But, he had money and he had connections. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting with that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to meet the deadline of any of these things. And even if they do, I mean, 100 pages of blacked out nothing that's not the files being released. So,
Yeah. I mean, they talk about being the most transparent administration in history, and the transparency is like literally pages and pages. Complete like there were certain like portions that were completely blacked out,
mhm.
which
Yeah.
I don't even understand how you pitch the whole most transparent administration in history. And then just today, they released another batch of the Epstein files, and here goes. Dataset 8 of the Epstein files show that a victim stated that Trump and Epstein raped her and that a limo driver heard Trump in the back speaking to Jeffrey about abusing girls. The victim then committed suicide in January of 2000 after reporting the incident. Police didn't believe it was suicide. I mean, that right there, I think encapsulates so much of why Donald Trump didn't want this released. I think that there's going to be continuously like I think that he's smothered all over the Epstein files. I think so is Bill Clinton. And like I think that like let's say hypothetically, and I'm still in the camp of like I don't I don't believe that Trump or Bill Clinton actually did anything with any of these girls, but I think that they knew. I think that they were complicit
Mm.
the entire time. Do I think that they actually like were involved with any of this? Probably not. I just don't see Bill Clinton or Donald Trump. I mean, well, actually, I think Donald Trump did like younger girls too. I mean, there are like cases
Yeah.
17 and 18. But like I
I
guess
think the
nothing.
relationship that they had, if you know what he's doing and then you bring girls from your pageants to that and then
I
like
think he was complicit. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I
yeah,
think
and also I do think that I don't necessarily believe that you know, obviously this is all hypothetical, but do think that it's possible that there was some sort of level of blackmail with it. Right?
yeah,
Like, I don't know if they knew that they were underage girls or things like that. I do think that it's possible that they did stuff with people or, got a massage, um, or something like that.
mhm,
Um, and, one thing led to another. Then you have like some tapes or something about it. But like, there's just no way to me that this guy doesn't have some sort of blackmail or something to get money because how else does he have all these connections, these financing and stuff like that? And like once you get into real estate, sure, I guess you can do that, but at a certain point too, you have to find your money in some way,
yeah.
So I think there's just the money trail needs to be followed for sure, I think. Um, and also, there's thousands of victims, and they've said that there's notorious and well-known men in these rings. So it's like it might not be Bill Clinton or Donald Trump, but it's somebody famous that you know, or at least some people know.
Yeah.
So I think that's a concern, but also I think the more it goes on and the longer it drags out, it does seem like there's not enough truth and evidence in some of these things, and some of the craziest allegations and things that I've seen on, Twitter. And this is from like pretty reputable sources that I was seeing too. It's not just like some random accounts talking about that, some of the video that might have been uploaded was like a computer edited video and like might not even be real, which sounds just almost too far-fetched to even believe. Like,
Right.
like I just sit there and I was like, no, that can't be it. But then they're sitting there and then I look at it and I'm like, that literally looks like like a GTA loading screen or something. Like it doesn't look real.
Right.
Um, and I think if that is true, what else if they had put in some computer generated image to like distract from people, that means that there's something like completely like questionable that like even beyond what we know. And the lengths at which they would go, then that makes you begin to say, okay, did Epstein really kill himself? Like now it's like a real question mark.
I know.
So
I think the Jeffrey Epstein debate is just so it's so difficult to have because like I said though, my thing is if Jeffrey Epstein was this, the head of like this huge, sophisticated, integrated pedophile ring, like
mhm,
why why have not more names come out? Why has there not been like, you would think that if he was killed, there would be like that would be like the black switch of like release everything. Like that would be his ability, like his nuclear codes. I just I like I said, I just find it so
mhm,
far-fetched to believe that, but at the same time, there's just more and more information that comes
mhm.
out that like makes it seem sketchy. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
now I'm the one that sounds like a conspiracy theorist because I don't believe that there's this huge integrated like web and like
Mhm.
Donald Trump. There's just a few things that also just came out. I don't know if you just heard about this. Right here, Donald Trump flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet at least 8 times in new documents revealed. Giselle Maxwell was also on board for at least four of those trips. I don't even know what to say to that. And then on top of that, a newly released Epstein document includes a letter from Jeffrey wrote to fellow sex offender Larry Nasser alleging that Donald Trump shares their love of young nubile girls.
Mm.
I mean, I just is this the first time that you're hearing about this?
I mean, I don't know. That phrasing, probably not. Like, it sounds kind of like, yeah, like I've heard some different things before. Because,
But
like, I
this was
mean,
released. Like
this
this was
level,
just
no, yeah,
released
like
like 30 minutes ago.
I think seeing that it's like in the government files and like there's certain conversations being had with it, even in those circles. Um,
What are your initial thoughts on that? Like, what's the first thing that went through your mind when you heard Jeffrey Epstein sent a letter to Larry Nasser saying that Donald Trump also liked nubile girls?
um, I mean, kind of makes sense. I mean, the way he's had conversations, the things he said. I think the thing is, if you don't listen to him anymore and you never piece together all the little weird kind of things he said and like, comments about women and different stuff and, you know, I think Trump acts like he's like some saint or something like that. And it's like, let's be honest, we know how this is. We know how this goes. And, there was a report, which, obviously like you never know if these things are accurate or if somebody's just saying something, but
Right.
there was I think it was released earlier where there was an event with a young model and her mother were at the I think it was Mar-a-Lago where they were at. Um and Trump's wife at the time, Marla Maples, was there, and I guess they were in the bathroom or something with the mother. And
I think I
so
heard this story.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Marla like grabs her and says, basically protect her, keep her away from specifically my husband and
Yep.
all these men. But like blatantly calls out her husband and says, specifically him,
Yeah.
which obviously, she denied. But, I think one, connecting all the different situations with Trump and all the different conversations, all the different accusations, I'd kind of be a fool to not at least think about it, at least sit there and say, that seems a little fishy. And I think, I don't know Donald Trump, and no one does.
Right.
So don't like, I think some people were like, maybe the MAGA supporters and some people were like, I know him. He just wouldn't do that. He's not like that. And it's like, you don't know him. You don't know him.
No.
Like, your parasocial relationship means nothing.
Right.
Um, and I think we'll see where it goes, but um, clearly like there was a reason why there was such a fight against it and why there's still such a fight for stuff coming out. Um, but we'll see if they bring charges against, Bondi and if they go down that route, or if they continue to release stuff, and at like what point if we're like 5 weeks, 6 weeks from now and they're still like gradually releasing stuff, like when are the charges going to come in? Like
Like the issue with these Epstein files. I'm glad that you brought up the charges. The issue with these Epstein files is there was an attorney for some of the girls that said like once everything is released that if there aren't charges against like 15 or 16 different people, he's like that means that the not all the files were released.
hmm,
When does that happen? Right? Like
yeah.
do these charges come? And like what happens if they don't? Are we always going to question whether or not like all of the files are released? Because like if there's like 15 or 16 different people that should be charged,
Hmm.
one, why are they not charging them now? right?
Yeah.
Like, I get that the Epstein files, like there's certain things that you have to, but like if you go to court, you can put like you don't have to publish everything, especially like if it's regarding national security. You're allowed to do this covertly, right? Like, you
Hmm.
don't have to publish everything. Like this can be like put in a skiff or whatever. So
Yeah.
like, when do these indictments happen? That's that is my big question. When do these indictments happen? Because I think realistically, um, that you just you can't talk about releasing all the Epstein files and then not have any indictments immediately after. We've
Yeah.
already technically they were supposed to have released everything this past Friday, and now they're being in contempt. And there's not a single indictment that I've heard of. Not
No.
one. Not by the Republican Party, not by the Democratic Party, not by any of these legacy media outlets. Nothing has been talked about in terms of like any indictments. So like when does that happen? I thought that all the
Hmm.
files were technically supposed to release last Friday. Now they're in contempt of Congress. Like
Yeah.
when does that happen?
I mean, I do think like, as much as we say like, oh, they didn't meet the deadline, it's against the law, like how things get enforced and things like that. Like I think people are just kind of waiting it out, and it's a busy season of not like worrying about those things. It's like, oh, I got to get home for Christmas, got to do these things. Like, oh, like leave it till next year.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really do think there's a degree of like, let's see where it goes for a little bit. Um, but I mean, I do think that it's going to keep lingering, and it never seems to die, and I don't really think it should, to be honest. Um, there, you know, like you were saying, if there is some sort of national security angle or concern to those things, and they are hiding those things, which, obviously you'd never be able to figure those things out for sure. But, it makes you begin to question, it's like, if our national security institutions are protecting sex offenders for the sake of like, the country, or it's the patriotic thing to do,
Yeah.
what else are they telling us, like making us suffer through? And like, I don't mean to like start going on like a conspiracy theory tangent, but I mean, the levels of trust would be completely damaged, which honestly, they already should be in some ways for just other situations that we've seen with those things. But, I do, but there's either a person or some other, not security, something's getting being protected.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I think it's like only a matter of time before like just more details come out. So, I mean, I think we'll see what comes.
I mean, just what was released today, I get why. I feel like you just have to flood the zone at this point because, like,
Yeah.
seeing that a limo driver apparently reported that Donald Trump was talking about abusing young girls, and then this letter to Jeffrey Nassar
Mhm.
saying, like, Donald Trump also likes young women, like, and then on top of that, like, Donald Trump was on Jeffrey's private jet 8 different times. We already had like a bunch of stuff already come out like on last Friday about Donald Trump. Like at this point, just flood the
Hmm.
zone, rip the band-aid
Yeah.
off, get rid of every. I don't know why there's this slow leak of everything because then you're just giving people news stories over. I think that they
Hmm.
botched how they're doing this because like
Yeah.
realistically, this could be a news story for the next like 2 weeks, when in reality they could have made it a news story for like 4 or 5 days before the next big thing, right? Release it all before Christmas.
Hmm.
Everybody's too busy spending time with their family to really like be engaged in social media like that. But instead, they're like, let's go ahead and slow bleed this. Let's go ahead and
Hmm.
release it some on Friday. Let's go ahead and release some on Monday. Let's go ahead and release some more on
Hmm.
Tuesday. And now we're hearing all this stuff. And then
Yeah.
more and more news. This just seems like a botched release. Like I
Yeah.
don't get why they thought that this way of like talking about everything
Mhm.
was a good idea.
Yeah.
Usually they're pretty good at social media, but like I don't know.
Mhm. I think I think they're a little too good at social media, and I think which it goes to another conversation, which we don't have to get into all the details, although I do think it was a very interesting story. Um, but the Susie Wiles interview, and like basically the chief of staff going in and talking about everybody and saying like all these details about people. Um, when that event happened, right after it came out and everybody was like, why is she saying all these different things? Everybody in Trump world tweeted basically almost the same, MAGA AI tweet about,
Yep.
she's so great, she's amazing, she's wonderful, which I do believe that she has all the juice in the administration, because one, nobody else has been able to like be as smooth of an operator as I think she has been. Now, nothing's completely smooth with Trump, but I think,
Right.
being able to say all these things about everybody, and then everybody's like, "You're great, you're wonderful." It's like, oh, she has a lot of like sway. Um, but I do think like that doesn't play well.
Right.
It's like y'all want to talk about like the swamp and all these different things, and it's like you're creating your own swamp, and you're so great with the socials. Like, we saw the content making that they have with the ice raids and all that content, and then memeing it up where they're like, fight for your heritage and all this type stuff. It's like it's fun and all when it's your side, but after a while it starts to get, especially when people are angry and they don't feel like the government's answering any of their needs in terms of like affordability,
Yeah.
cost of living or anything like that. And your government officials are sitting out like roasting each other and like saying like, look at us and all this type of stuff. It doesn't play well in the long run.
Yeah.
I think it's momentary bliss for your base, but then it becomes like, do I really want this there? Like, is this the what we really should be tweeting from the government account?
Yeah.
And I think there's been misstep after misstep after misstep now where Trump is not on his game anymore. The administration's not on their game anymore. And even though they're winning in some ways, I think in the long run they're not.
Yeah.
Like their approval ratings are tanking. Um, the comments and the thing, they're not passing anything legislation wise. They're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Um, so I think with all those things combined, there's just a lot going on with them that like every single thing they do beyond just the Epstein file release is dragging them down, I feel like. Um,
Yeah.
but it seems to me not even just the administration, but the conservative space in general is seem to be borderline civil war right now. So that's fun to see.
Yeah. Speaking of Civil War, also this past weekend, I don't know. Now I'm starting to believe the whole Mossad Israel is on why Trump is so dedicated to Israel, because it seems like Ben Shapiro and the Candace Owens and Erica Kirk thing has really like also taken a lot of limelight away from this Epstein situation, and like really
Mm,
put a lot of focus on like the division and the civil war that's happening in this conservative party, because it almost feels like this was orchestrated perfectly to uh, uh, when the Epstein files were released. Because now that
mm.
this is another big distraction, right? We see Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens beefing with Ben Shapiro. Um, okay, so Ben Shapiro is apparently a Talmudic Jew. At least that is according to Candace Owens. Um, let's be honest here. Uh, I've said this in the past. I think that Candace Owens was always pro-Palestine. I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene has been
Mhm.
pro-Palestine because that they're anti-Semitic. I think that they are
Yeah.
on the right side of history for the wrong reason.
Hmm.
I've always believed that. I think that like now they've just been justified in being able to be anti-Semitic because like now all of
Hmm.
a sudden, and I'm not saying that they're justified, right? Because like reality is like
Yeah.
Semitism is completely wrong, but like they have been able to get away with
Yeah.
being anti-Semitic because of the situation at hand.
Hmm. I mean, I definitely think there's an embrace of like anti-Semitism from both sides, and I completely say that because
I agree. Not, not wrong.
it's pretty awful because I think even the arguments of like the attack in Australia, and they're saying like even some Jewish people are saying things where I'm like, you do realize you're just giving people an out.
Yeah,
You're saying Israel is making anti-Semites, and it's like no, no, no. Israel is making bad decisions and is in doing damage to the image of Jewish people at large.
right.
But every single person who makes a decision to judge an entire group, and I'm gonna be honest, even if you say all Israelis, still the same thing to me because it's no different than the Israelis looking at all the Palestinians and saying they're all, terrorists or they don't deserve to live. Like
Yeah.
sitting here and just blanketing an entire group of people, you know, that's on you. And I think sitting there and, I've seen leftists, I've seen other people in liberal spaces, even conservatives, sitting here basically blaming Jews and saying like almost it's like your fault, like or it's Israel's fault that people hate you. And I think people are scapegoating a lot with that, and also seeing Israel behind every single thing, and like as much as Israel influences certain things, and
Israel
as
killed
Israel
Charlie
does this,
Kirk, Chase.
well, apparently, which I can't even get into Candace's theories. Egypt planes and flying and you know it's too much for me. It's too much for me to go down that rabbit hole. But I do think I mean, uh, I'm no Ben Shapiro fan, but the writing is starting to be on the wall for the Republican Party, and they're gonna have to deal with it. And like I don't know. Like some ways I kind of agree with Ben, and then other areas I'm like, I don't know. Tucker has a point with the talking about all Muslims and stuff like that in America. Like he has a point with that, but at the same time it's like,
What do you mean he has
but
a point with that?
well, he has a point with them being discriminatory towards Muslim Americans and talking about all of them and saying like, oh, you know, they're jihadist or they don't
Oh,
belong in this country or all these different things, and
right.
it's like it's interesting because he's like I'm a Christian and I say those things, and it's like okay, but you don't care about certain groups, and also like I think it's strange to sit here, and I guess we can segue to like JD Vance's kind of commentary and insane speech.
It's okay to be white now.
Yeah, exactly, because apparently it's a thing that you had to apologize for being white apparently. um which I think indicates kind of the type of rhetoric that they're embracing. Um, and this white grievance politics, which is utterly ridiculous to me. But it it does kind of show where they're trying to head with the rhetoric, and like, I think a lot of white men would love nothing else than to get a scapegoat for the things that they feel, right? And so
Yeah.
instead of, like Candace Owens was saying, now she's blaming Jews for slavery and saying that they were the main ones of slavery, which is like, have you been to the American South? Like,
Yeah.
and look, were there Jewish people that probably had slaves and were there Jewish families in some places? That's probably a thing that happened. But like, if you think that the vast majority of slave owners in America were Jewish, you have no concept of American history.
You're out of your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think um there is, there's always been an undercurrent of these theories and these, conversations from the Klan and other people to target Jews and say like this is what they're doing to our country. They're making it, also I think because of the liberal lean of, Jewish Americans, there's also this conversation of like they're changing my country.
Yeah.
right? And I think they seem to be embracing that conversation, and also saying like, oh, well, we don't want to like, JD Vance was saying, I don't have a list of people to sit here and, cast aside, say like, you don't belong in this movement anymore, right? Whereas
Right.
like Ben Shapiro was like, we have to call these grifters out. We have to say these things. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I think Ben's right. If the Republican Party doesn't deal with, the rhetoric and the grifters and the frankly just racists that are in that movement, it's going to be an issue. But I mean, we see the most likely Republican nominee for 2028 basically embracing the conversation of like, like you were saying, you don't have to be apologize for being white. Um, you know, talking about the Somalis, which is weird because at one second you're saying, we shouldn't discriminate against people like saying like anybody's wrong for their ethnicity or like race or as bad and all these different things, but also look at those Somalis in Minnesota. They're so gross. Or, it's like it's a ridiculous conversation to me. Um, and I do think it's interesting to, depending on what audience JD Vance is talking to, he switches it up.
Yes.
That turning point, no apologies, no, sitting there saying Nick Fuentes can kiss my ass, nothing.
Right.
You say that in print where not as many people are going to see it, but you make sure to say the little lines that will be popular with certain people, even though the Nick Fuentes types think you're they're not with you.
Right.
They think you're gay. So, I think but it is interesting just everything with the turning points, the back and forth and them all getting out on the stage and then Megyn Kelly saying, I guess she's no longer friends with Ben and you know,
That whole division thing, I
mhm,
think my big issue, and Kyle Kulinski actually touched on this a little bit. My big issue is that Ben Shapiro has never had any issues with any of the racism or the misogyny or whatever kind of hatred that
mhm,
he's been spewing. Like even when
mhm,
Kanye West, when Candace Owens was defending Kanye West when he was going through his
yeah,
moments of like going through like really anti-Semitic things, like Ben Shapiro still supported Candace Owens. It wasn't until Candace started to um, uh, criticize Israel that suddenly Ben Shapiro was like, "Whoa, that's crossing a line." It's just been very fascinating because like
mhm,
he created this bed, now he's
yeah,
expected to lie in it, and now he's uncomfortable. Now he doesn't want to lie in it. Now he wants to start calling out all of, I mean, well, he's not really calling out anything other than the anti-Semitism.
mhm.
Which I mean is
I think he's beginning to realize, and I think other people in the Republican Party as well, because I saw Nikki Haley echoed it, which how much influence they still have, and that I think Megyn Kelly said something about he's losing followers or something like that,
yeah,
um, but I do think there is like a conversation to be had because I do think Republican politics is not immune from the opinions and kind of sway of the American society at large. And
right,
American society is beginning to sway a little bit more pro-Palestinian.
right,
Now, I think people like read into that and they're like, you got to reject Israel completely and like all this different types of stuff. If you think that any person is voting based on what's happening in Palestine and Israel and the governments there, there's very few people that are doing that. Like not enough to sway things. And clearly that was the case in 2024. Um, but I do think, I think as it keeps going, like there is just an attitude of like, does does our partnership with Israel make sense for our, you know, outlook, our goals within the region of the Middle East? And, both sides, I think Republicans and Democrats are beginning to question like what extent do we like ally with them and like in what ways do we like work with them, right? Because I do think there is like personally like obviously like I have deep issues with the Israeli government. you know, overall with like not even just like with Palestine, with their own governing of Israel and, multiple different other things. Um, so I think there has to be, questioning of that relationship. But, clearly the Republican Party is also questioning that. Now, is it going to be let's be normal and, have a conversation, or is it going to be like I hate the Jews? Is really what it seems like we're going to be dealing with, which is, you know, terrifying, to say the least, because I think what people don't realize is it'll come for you eventually.
Yeah.
And that's what people aren't realizing. Like, oh, they'll come for the Jews. They'll say these things. And it's like, no, they're really starting to, load in on everybody. And it is interesting to me. They'll go 1 second and say it's bad. And then again, like I was saying, like the Somali group is now like the main one of the targets and like up in the news where they keep talking about it. And it's like, you know, beginning to determine who and who isn't an American and just continuing that conversation. Um, and I think, we begin to see like Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, they're both talking about these different things and saying like, oh, people who are grifting, right? Or, Tucker saying like, oh, the people who just talk about Muslims, bad about Muslims and things like that. And like both of them still support Trump, which I think is interesting because he is the main one who brought, especially went from Ben Shapiro's side, right? Like
Right.
you don't want to criticize the boss, but he is one of the ones who brought in and made room for kind of these more anti-Semitic, racist thoughts within the Republican Party. Now, was that always kind of there? Yeah, it was always kind of there. Like, I've never thought the Republican Party was like woke and enlightened since, you know, at least Nixon.
Right.
But, I do think there was this undercurrent of like, we're not racist. If you are racist, you don't belong. But I do think there is this like, we're not racist, but you can be on our side.
Right.
And it's, that is a little concerning because, how far are you gonna cozy up with people?
I mean, like you got to look at like the rise of Nick Fuentes and like
Yeah.
what how big of an audience that he's really starting to garner ever since the Charlie Kirk passing, right? Like he apparently like Charlie Kirk was the tame one, which is insane to say because like Nick Fuentes is literally calling JD Vance's wife like racial slurs and
Mhm.
saying that he's like race mixing and how bad that is. And then all of a sudden you don't hear him going and condemning any of that on social media. You don't hear him talking about like that in any of his interviews, like how people need
Hmm.
to completely like disavow everything that he says and
Yeah.
condemning him. And like also on top of that, like even before that, right? Like those we talked about this before. The Doge employee that said that like he hated Indians
Hmm.
before it was cool. And JD Vance was out there going and pushing for this guy to be reinstated and get his job back. And like my thing is like if you're like anti-cancel culture and you don't want people to say like stupid things like that, like at least make them apologize. He didn't even ask for apology or ask if those his feelings were changed or his opinions on these things have changed. He just said
Hmm.
like, "Oh, just because of a couple of mean tweets, he shouldn't." Like, you're just normalizing it at this point. And it wasn't just a
Yeah.
couple mean tweets. Like this was constant behavior. He said it was he hated Indians before it was cool, and like, or he was racist before it was cool. He hated Indians.
Hmm.
All of these other like racist things. It wasn't just like a one or two time thing. It was like
Yeah.
he had an extensive history of like racist comments. And
Hmm.
Jake Vance never stood up against that. He's just a coward. I think that if the whoever the Democratic nominee is 4 years from now needs to absolutely drive that home that he doesn't that JD Vance if JD Vance does become the Republican nominee that JD Vance doesn't have the spine to stand up for his own family. You talk
Hmm.
about that right there is a winning message. He can't even stand
Hmm.
up for his own family. How is he going to stand up for you? That right there's a winning message for me. You hear
Yeah.
that, you hear that, you just you immediately go, okay, if he can't even stand up for his own family, how is he going to stand up for the American people?
Hmm.
That's a winning message to me.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I do think JD employs the same thing that Trump kind of did last cycle, where depending on the outlet, he'll say certain things and, target it. And it's not like I think the thing is it's like it's kind of the same general spiel,
Yeah,
but it'll feel different, right? Like if Trump was on a Twitch stream with somebody younger, it would be a very different vibe than if he was talking to, I'm trying to think, some Fox News or something like that, right? Like
right,
like depending on the outlet, it changes. And that's the thing, like one with a segmented media, you don't see every clip of everybody saying everything.
right,
And so they're able to kind of tailor it and deliver it to like their specific audience that they're speaking to at that moment. And that helps. Like you can really lie in a lot of ways and like target people and it just kind of work out for you and people be like, "Oh, I didn't hear them say that." Or
right,
like just confused about things. Um so I think using that and then kind of like winking in certain areas towards the white supremacists and that type crowd is clearly like something that's happened, but I wonder if like because there's already this division, plus isn't it a little strange that they wanted to tell us it was so that you coronated Kamala Harris. You just gave her the nomination and it's like Turning Point USA just endorsed JD Vance for president in 2028 and there's not even a primary. Hasn't been any debates, hasn't been any conversation. You want to
this
talk
is the
about
first
coronation?
Donald
You
Trump
want to talk
hasn't even
about
been
coronation?
President for a full year yet.
Yeah. And it's already, well, JD is going to be the nominee, which clearly, I think some people are saying it's because JD won't toe the line to Israel or whatever the different argument is. And I don't believe those things. I believe that he will do what, basically every other one does. And I think that there's this issue that I think one leftist and also like a contingent of the new right who act like Donald Trump is, you know, against the establishment
Hmm.
of the Republican Party, of, the wealthy and stuff like that. And it's like, what does he do? He tries to invade Venezuela. He tries to destabilize their regime. He tr bombs Iran. What is the difference between the neoconservative, like, old wing of the Republican Party and Donald Trump?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe the racism and like the casual, like, I don't care about certain like truth, but at the end of the day, a lot of times they deliver certain things that would have just been the bread and butter for Republicans, which is why they tolerate it.
right.
So,
100%. 100%.
um, and I think we'll see how that lasts. I also think, JD better be watching the approval polls because one, he wasn't that liked to begin with, and if Trump keeps going the way he's going,
Yeah.
it'll be a reckoning. And I just don't see the coalition surviving. I mean, when you lose Marjorie Taylor Greene and like all these other people are starting to like drop the amount of Republicans leaving Congress, like this is just like, and there might be more specifics to it, but I think a first term Wyoming Senator, Cynthia Lummis, is leaving.
Hmm.
That's just one person.
Yeah.
There's going to be multiple other ones, and once the writing is on the wall, it's going to be like, huh, I'm gonna just leave. And especially like I was reading like the way in which they're treated by Trump, you
Hmm.
know, piling on, and then um, I don't think I think a lot of these things that he's doing are going to be very toxic in the long run.
Yeah.
Um, just to kind of like talk about the approvals a little bit too, like you can only do so many monuments to yourself before it starts to get a little weird.
Bro,
Like I'm
the
naming ships after myself. I'm naming the Trump Kennedy
the
Center.
Kennedy Center having Trump's name on it is just it's too much for me. Yeah, he's doing too much. And to go back to your point of like people leaving. Like, I think that's the reason why we saw Brian Kemp is not entering the race for senator.
Yeah.
We saw Tom Tillis of North Carolina. He's dropping out, and that's leaving it wide open for Roy Cooper
Hmm.
for to take over as Democratic nominee. Like, there's just so many, like, you see Marjorie Taylor Greene dropping out, you see Nancy Mace talking about leaving Congress. Like, we're seeing a lot of Republicans start to kind of like instead of pushing back against Trump, they're just leaving office in general. Like, and
Or
that's
that
where
in
the
some ways is the freedom to do that. Like, oh, I'm just gonna leave, so now I can say whatever.
yeah, but like, I mean, if that's what you need to do in order to be like to not get on Trump's bad side, then there's no longer a Republican Party anymore.
Hmm.
It's just the
Yeah,
Donald.
MAGA party, as they say now.
Yeah, it
But
literally is.
in some ways, as a Democrat, I kind of relish that. Because if it's the Trump party, and it's the Trump party, and it's the Trump party, what happens once Trump's not there anymore?
Yeah.
What happens to the party?
Yep.
And I mean, maybe there's some new Republican that like catches the zeitgeist and like everybody kind of like brings in and is like, okay, this is our guy.
Yeah.
But I think there's certain elements of Trump that cannot be replicated, and certain voters who do not have that parasocial relationship with anybody but him. And
Right.
once he leaves, it's gonna be like, you know what? I don't actually care about you. Um, so hey, and maybe JD Vance is able to kind of capitalize off of that. Maybe he has the motion. I don't think so. Um, but we'll see.
I think that he has enough motion to at least get the nomination.
True.
I don't see.
President.
Um, Alrighty. Well, that was fun. I appreciate you as always, Chase. This was good. I'm sure that there will be some other crazy things happening next week, but I
Mm.
will talk to you later, my friend.
All right, sounds good.
Peace.